Welcome to another video after action report for Avalanche Press's South Pacific. Today, we're going to take a look at this particular scenario called Uncle Albert and Admiral Halsey. And this is kind of an interesting one, and it's one of the few scenarios that's available that actually has some battle wagons whacking at each other, at least in the initial South Pacific installment. There's going to be a second version called Iron Bottom Sound that I hope will have more. But today, this is what we're going to do. This scenario takes place on the 22nd of October, which is 4 days after Halsey has taken over from Admiral Crutchley. So Crutchley was very conservative and never actually set foot on Guadalcanal. So Nimitz replaced him with Halsey because he knew that Halsey was going to actually go to these places and work at solving problems, which Crutchley apparently didn't do. Anyway, so the story here is that the Japanese admiral is coming to make an attack on Henderson Field. So they've built a task force for bombardment, and they've got a covering force for that. And then, as Japanese always do, they have a remote covering force. So they're back to the every man for himself principle. So the Americans have a probe going into the Solomon Sea, and they are looking for trouble, and they're going to find it. So there is a battleship here. There is the USS Washington, and there is a number of destroyers going with it and a cruiser or two. So this is going to be a fun battle. There are some special rules, though. First of all, the visibility, it's a nighttime scenario, is 2 for Americans and 3 for Japanese. So the Japanese will get a slight advantage there on sighting. Second, the American visibility goes up to 3 if the Japanese are firing their guns. The next is, until ships make contact, they are going to have to move 1 hex towards the opposite map edge every impulse. So the Americans have to move to the east, the Japanese have to move to the west. And it's pretty much guaranteed that they're going to come into contact. Finally, the Japanese have one additional issue, and this is very accurate. They're using the Shenkaiden 3 bombardment shells for Henderson Field, which are composed of thousands or hundreds of little metal rods of incendiaries. When they are exposed to air, they're going to burn. And so they would cover. The idea was that they would cover the airfields and burn anything on the airfields, like the highly flammable aircraft. The problem is that this doesn't actually penetrate any armor. So the Americans don't have too much to worry about for the bombardment force, which is Kirishima and Hai. When they attack on ships, the first round, the first impulses, they can do damage to unarmored areas, so they can nail the destroyers. But they can't do a lot of damage to the Washington until they have time to reload their ammunition in the ammunition lifts. Apparently, this was a rather long job, and it required all the people available to be working like maniacs, and it still took them about 10 minutes to swap everything because of where the ammunition was stored in the storage lockers. So it's all very interesting, and it's going to be a bloodbath. The one thing I found from playing through this scenario was that as the Japanese player, you need to get in close. And as the American player, you want to make sure that the Washington is protected from the Japanese torpedoes. Because if the Japanese get a large torpedo attack off, it's really in trouble. You can definitely take down a battleship with destroyers in this game. So we're going to go ahead and commence play and start off with the tactical turn. A lot of the games we've seen so far have specified that one side or the other has the tactical initiative. So let's start with the Axis. Let's roll our dice. And it's a 6. So the initiative goes to the Americans. So the Japanese is the non-initiative player. There's our determine initiative phase. So the non-initiative player moves 4s, 3s, or 2s. Everything the Japanese has is 3s. So we're going to move them. They have to move 1 hex further towards the east edge of the map every round until they come into combat. Now the trick is here, I can't even get these guys lower because if I move these down the map more towards Savo Island and more towards Henderson, then they're not moving towards the specified board edge. So that's a bit tricky. So I'm going to move down and get the Americans now because it is the initiative player. So the initiative player is going to move one. Oops, so let's catch them all. Now the battleship is a 2, so it can move this phase, but not through all of the phases. It's going to have to take a powder on one of them. So I'm going to move that there. All right, now let's go look at gunnery combat, torpedo combat, none. Now the non-initiative player moves the 4s, 3s, or 1s. So all those are 3s again, so we're going to move them. Always going towards the board edge. I've put labels on the bombardment force just for fun. That's a counter that you've got here in the game markers, and you can put that on and put a random small bit of text on it. So it's kind of handy. And oh, I've done the same thing here for Henderson Field. I've got objective. So let's get the rest of these guys. Move them 1, 1, 1. Move the Americans. 1, 1. That's 4s, 3s, or 2s. Oh, I lied. That's not the Washington because the Washington only moves on 2s, and this is a 3 phase. So I'm going to leave it there, but I'm going to leave the destroyers. I can't leave the destroyers because the destroyers have to move closer to the edge too. So we're going to outrun our screen in a little bit. We'll get the destroyers out. So that just leaves Washington, and now all these guys are the same speed. They can move, and Washington can follow up. So I'm going to click on the move just to clear the moved markers, and I'm going to get my initiative player. I moved that, so there we go. It's gunnery combat, torpedo combat, and then the non-initiative player again. And now it's 4s, 2s, or any towed ship. The Japanese have no 2s, so they're not going to do anything. So now the initiative player moves 4s or 2s. There is a 4 in here. There are 2 4s. They're Fletcher class. They're going to need to move 1. All right. And then I think we're all caught up. To do that, we're just going to double click on the stacks and expand them, and we can see the movement values. I'll zoom in on that a little bit so you can see them a little bit better. Okay. So I'm going to clear my move marker, and I'm going to go to my gunnery combat. No gunnery combat. No torpedo combat. Non-initiative player moves 4s, 3s, or 1s. So these are all 3s. So there, and there, and there. So my bombardment is getting close to Savo Island, and I'm going to move the only way I can, unless I want to actually run into slugging, which I don't. So clear the movement. Initiative player moves 4s, 3s, or 1s. So there's the 4s. There's the 3s. We can't move these all because the Washington's there. So we're going to move them individually like this. And this guy here can move into the square of Washington. I'm going to clear my move markers. And then it's gunnery. It's torpedo combat. Then the non-initiative player moves 4s, 3s, or 2s. So they're all 3s. So we're going to move again here and here and here. Then we're going to move here. And then these guys, I'll select them both and move them to that spot there. Now we go to the initiative player, and he can move all of his ships. So I'm going to move this guy and this guy and this guy. And we're going to take the, oh, we can move not, can't, we're going to select them all. And then I'm going to shift select and get rid of, I can't do that. So I'm just going to go click on this guy, move him. And then I'm going to move there. So the cruiser, It's one of those light cruisers with the anti-aircraft, which is really going to be handy at night. Anyway, and then I will move my other cruiser, Boise. I guess that is. I gotta look. Helena. That's it. Helena Handbasket is moving now. And then I'm going to move the Aaron Ward and then the Washington. And I'm going to clear my moved markers. Now my formation is spreading out, and that's partly due to the special rules. I'm not particularly crazy about that. They should be closer together. But we're going to have some scouts out that are going to run into problems before anybody else. Unfortunately, it's those beautiful Fletcher class destroyers that are probably going to hit first. So I'm going to go to gunnery combat, torpedo combat, then disengagement, conclusion of the tactical cycle, end of the tactical cycle, begin the tactical turn, start the tactical turn, and then roll for initiative. Now you roll a 3, so it's the Japanese with initiative. So I'm going to start by moving the non-initiative player. Let's get there. 4s, 3s, or 2s. So this is everything that can move right now. So I'm going to move these guys down, because they're still moving forward. That's going to move. That's going to move. That's going to move. And then this is going to move. Okay. So as the American, I'm using some God's eye view here because I know where the Japanese are coming. I'm going to try and attack the bombardment group first and see how far I can get with that. It's the smaller of the two groups, and it's a disadvantage because they're using the incendiary shells. So that's where I want to start this combat. So I'm going to increase the tactical phase, and I'm going to move everything here. So the 4s, 3s, or 2s, they're all 4s, or they're all 3s. So I'm going to move them. And then these guys are all going to move 1. And we'll clear the move markers, check for gunnery, check for torpedo, check for non-initiative player, moves 4s, 3s, or 1s, 4s, 3s, 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 and 3s. Gunnery, the initiative player. I'm sorry, I didn't click the turn marker here. So that's no gunnery. There's no gunnery because we're range 2 or 3 depending upon the side. Torpedo combat, none of that. The non-initiative player moves 4s or 2s. So here's the 4s, and here's the 2s. And then the initiative player moves 4s, 2s, or any towed. They don't have any, so we're going to click on moved, and then we're going to increase the turn again. Gunnery combat, no. Torpedo combat, no. Non-initiative player moves 4, 3, or 1. So we're going to start. I just opened that stack up. I'm going to get the destroyers out from under Washington, but we got to get these guys out here first. All right. And then we're going to move the initiative player. So we go 3. There we go. I'm going to clear that. We have gunnery combat. There's nothing happening. And then torpedo combat, nothing happening. Now the non-initiative player moves. So he moves the 4s. And boom, now we're in visual range right here. So there's the 4s. There's the 3s. There's the 2s. And then the last 3. I call these 2s because they're stacked with Washington, and Washington moves 2. So that's just where we're at. Let's just check the ships there. So Washington's a 2, and then the cruisers. Well, that's a nice little force there. Anyway, so that's good for the non-initiative player. Now the initiative player gets to move 4, 3s, or 2s. So that's all of his units. And that puts him in range of these destroyers. So let's get him out here. And these guys should be able to crush the Fletchers. And this guy still has to move because they aren't in sight yet. All this is simultaneous. So next turn, they'll be able to turn and come down and come after the fleet. So that's it. Let's clear the movement. Let's go to gunnery combat. Are you ready? Okay, so the gunnery range is going to be 3 for the Japanese and 2 for the Americans, but it's simultaneous. So when they start firing, the Americans are going to be able to see them. So the Americans have for their cruiser here. I'm gonna scroll in because I keep calling these things. That's a destroyer. There we go. So this guy here, the Macalla, is out of range. These two destroyers, the Fletcher and the Benson, are in range. So I'm going to start off by deciding where I'm going to fire. So I'm 2 hexes away, so I can fire my little 5-inch guns, but I can also fire at this one. I can fire at the battleship with the torpedoes if they survive. So I think the goal here is to get the torpedo shot in on Kirishima, see if we can't do some damage early on. In the meantime, the next most potent ship here is going to be probably the destroyers and the Tone as well. So I'm going to fire all 4 guns at Tone. So I'm going to need to fire 2 guns. And then the second 2 shots are going to have to confirm if they're hits because there's shell splashes from the water. So the first shot from the Benson is a 2 and a 3, neither of them hit. And then from the Fletcher, I believe that's the Fletcher. Yeah. 1 and 2. Oh, bad gunnery. So they're done. Let's mark them fired. And let's start looking at the next ones. There's no way around this. We're gonna get a lot of fire. I think that I'm going to start with the battleships because this is phase 20. If I get rid of my shells, next phase 20 I can bring in the real shells, not the illuminator or the incendiary shells. So the Kirishima is going to fire. It's got 8, so I'm going to fire 8 with my many dice. I'm going to go 8 and hits, and we've got no hits. The next one is going to be, because it's still in range and it's still in visible range, is going to be the Hai. And so it's going to fire and the same number. And I got 1 hit with Hai on Benson, but I've got a rule for confirmation and it doesn't confirm. So that's kind of cool. Battleships have fired, they're not getting anything. So now I've got 5 on Tone, 5 on Chikuma, and 7 on Suyusa. So I'm going to fire them now. Actually, I'm going to fire all 8 because the destroyers all have no armor on anything. So it's going to be pretty easy to penetrate. So I'm just going to go for all of them at once. So there's 8 and 6 and 6. So that's 20. Don't laugh at my math. 20. So I'm going to fire 20 dice at Benson. But you know what? There's a little trick here. I don't have a whole lot of space to show that, so I'm going to do them in rows in sets of 10 instead of sets of 30, in sets of 20. So that's not what I wanted. Let me get that one back. And this is just one of those vassalisms. It's a vacillation. So I bring up my many dice. I'm going to go for 10. And I get no hits, and then I'm going to do it again. And I get no hits. So that's kind of cool. Japanese have fired a lot there and haven't got much. Maybe I have a chance. So I'm going to look at the destroyers. So there's a 2 secondary on the Nagara, which is a light cruiser. So I'll take that one. So it's 2 and 3 is 5 and 3 is 8 and 3 is 11 and 3 is 14 and 3 is 17 and 3 is 20 and 3 is 23. So let's take 13. By the way, the cruisers in the bombardment force are also limited to incendiary shells, so they're not going to get any penetration here. Okay, so there are 3 hits, and then we do another 10. So we look at that, and we get 10. And we get another 3 hits. So we have 6 hits total. All of them need to confirm. So I need to roll a 4. I need to roll 4 times. So let's roll that. The 6 times. So I'm going to roll 6 dice. And we've got 1, 2 hits. So after all that smoke and fury, 2 hits on Benson. So let's take the hits. So let's go to the charts, go to the damage, and here's a gunnery damage table. And let's roll. The first hit is a 12, catastrophic damage. And the next one is a 9. So the 9 is a primary. There's no primaries, no secondaries, so it goes down to a tertiary. So let's start with him and let's go for tertiary. And we'll get rid of 1. All right. Now we've got to roll the catastrophic hit or the critical damage. So I'm going to roll that. I rolled an 8. So that's 2 hulls and a primary. There's no primary, so the primary goes to secondary, which goes to tertiary. And then there's 2 hulls and a tertiary. So there's only 2 hulls. So they go bye-bye. And okay, so Benham ran into a lot of fire, but it took that whole force to sink them, which is kind of cool. They're a little bit useful there. So I'm going to choose my allied private, find my salvage box, and I'm going to bring that up here just because it's handy. It really should be, well, that was really smart, Matt. This really should be a graveyard like you find in the Panzer Grenadier games, but it's not. So we're going to take this and we're going to drop it up here. And now I've actually got this guy lost somewhere. No, it didn't roll off. There we go. There's some things about Vassal that are a little bit difficult, but, we do what we can. There's not a lot of other real good systems that work as easily as this, at least not that I can figure out. Okay, so the ship is away and we are done with our gunnery combat. So we can fire torpedoes. Now the Japanese, at this point, I don't think there's a point in firing torpedoes at this destroyer because it's going to get eaten pretty quick. So I'm going to choose my Fletcher and I'm going to fire it at Kurishima, and I'm going to fire my with the chart showing, and I'm going to look very carefully at ship launched torpedo modifiers. The target is a battleship, so it's +1. Okay. So I'm going to roll 2 dice, or is it 3 dice? It's 3 dice for Fletcher. 1, 2, 3. So 1 torpedo hit. But now it's an American torpedo prior to 1943. So I must confirm with a second die roll of 5 or higher. And I do not confirm. So the torpedo hits, disappears, is dead. So there's no torpedo action there. So I'm going to close this guy up, and I'm going to go into Fletcher, and I'm going to mark his torpedoes gone. So, oops, let's get rid of all of them. Doesn't really matter because once one torpedo is fired, all the torpedoes are fired. That's just the way the rules work. So there we go, and we're going to attempt emergency repairs. Well, there's nothing there. It's damaged, just one destroyer gone. And we're going to end the tactical cycle. This is the second tactical cycle. So this means that there have been 44 phases so far. So 22 in the first one, 22 in the second. This game goes 10 cycles or 220 phases. So we're 10% of the way into the game. I lied. We're 20% of the way into the game. So I'm going to start the next tactical cycle, begin the tactical turn. The first thing we do is start the tactical turn cycle. It's this, determine initiative. We're 6, so the Americans have initiative. Then the non-initiative player moves 4s, 3s, or 2s. Now remember, this bombardment force can't fire any armor-piercing shells until phase 20. So they've got it's a bunch of reloading to do. So we're going to start off with getting the Japanese destroyers in here to try and chase this guy down. And we're going to take our bombardment force and move it. And now the bombardment force doesn't actually have to stay in separate places and move forward. So I'm going to move those guys together, and let's just take this bomb guy and let's remove it, the bombardment. So you still remember it's bombardment, and we'll take the other one. Where are you? And we'll move them to the top of the stack. Okay. Now we're going to get the other guys. They're up at the top. So let's go. Oops. And now these guys all want to move direction. So I'm going to rotate them, which you don't strictly have to do. It's just kind of fun that you can. So I will move them here and here. And we're going to clear move markers. And we're going to go to the initiative player, which is the Americans. And we're going to get the heck out of Dodge. So let's rotate him. And we want to go clockwise. 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 Oh, this is boring. I'm just going to hit the key, which is the square bracket key. So I need to make sure he's selected. All right. So he's moving out. I'm going to move into the Macala's space, but I'm going to leave the Macala where it is because the next, he's already in visual range of the Japanese, but out of the range of their guns, except for the Sendai, is it? The Nagara, sorry. So these guys here only have 2 shots that they can make on him. The battleships are out of range. So this is kind of where I want to start my next defensive line and start firing more torpedoes. So the battleship and its covering destroyers are going to move forward, and the Lansdowne is keeping the screen, and that's where we're at. So we're looking for a battle wagon fest here. But if I can get the Washington in a little faster, he might be able to make the range onto the either the Kirishima or the Hai. Actually, they're in the same hex now, so that will be pretty fun. Let's get there. So going to get rid of this guy. Phase 4 is gunnery combat. We do have gunnery combat. So the Fletcher is not fired. So I got to clear that. Okay, so the Fletcher, but everything has moved, so I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so the Fletcher is going to fire at the Makiguma. So that's the one on top. It's just easier that way. 1 shot, 2 shots, so no hits. All right, so now he's fired. And now the Japanese are going to fire, and they can't fire a range of 3. So 1, 2, 3. So these GC destroyers here aren't going to make it. So this guy here comes up to, I think we counted it up as 21. So we've got 2 and 3 is 5, 8, 11, 14, 17, 23. So we're going to roll 23 on Fletcher. So we're going to fire a multi-dice, and we're going to roll a 10, and then we're going to roll a 13. So 10 gives us 3 hits, and then 13 gives us 1 hit. So there's 4 hits here. So I'm going to roll 4 dice, and I need a confirmation. Wait, I don't need a confirmation. Yes, I do, because they're firing together. So we don't know who the first shell splash is. So we're going to shoot for 4 hits, roll it. We've got 1, 2 that have actually connected. So let's go open up our charts, and let's get to the damage, and put it back where it was. A 4 and a 4. Wow, and those are 2d6s. You can tell to make sure, because sometimes you think that you hit the wrong dice. So in damage, that's 2 hulls, a 4 and a 4, and unfortunately, I think that is it for Fletcher. At least she got her torpedoes off. No, there's an additional one. So this is good. So we're going to go ahead and leave that there, but she has moved in this phase because she can't move any further because she's got to be dead in the water for 1 phase, then she can keep moving. So Fletcher's fired, and it's going to be moved the next turn, or it's going to be considered to have been moved the next turn. These guys have fired. These guys cannot fire. And everything else is out of range, although it's getting close. So we're going to move the turn track along, go into torpedo combat, and the Fletcher is the only one that has torpedoes that can fire. The Japanese are not going to because they're going to wait for higher value targets. The Fletcher is really crippled now. It's got no gunnery, it's got no torpedoes, and it's been moved. So we're going to, I got to go back. Sorry. That's the nice thing about this turn counter. You can move it where you want to and back and forth. So torpedoes and then non-initiative player. So the non-initiative player is the Japanese. And so they're moving right here and right here. So they're going to go into a battle line moving forward. Then these guys are going to move here and here and here. Now this is where that whole fast battleship thing comes in, because the Japanese have these nice fast battleships that keep up with their destroyers. So the Americans do not. We've got this piecemeal movement down here because the Washington had to move forward and the destroyers all didn't. So that's it for that. The Japanese have moved. Now it's time for the initiative player. So 4, 3, or 1. So I've got to decide what I'm going to try and do here. I can fire. If I take my destroyers and take them up against the bombardment group, then I've got a chance of hitting. Well, I've got some decent torpedoes here. I've got 9 torpedoes if I survive gunnery, which is a big if. But it might be worth it. These guys are always going to be too far out, right? So they move 1, then they actually could fire torpedoes at the destroyer, but that's dumb. You always want to fire your torpedoes at the high value targets. So I'm going to actually take my destroyers and move them back. And I'm going to flip them around just because I can. Oops, too much. And then this guy's dead in the water, right? Because he's got a move marker on him. And that's because he lost a speed point, lost his hull. So that guy's not going to move any further. Then I'm going to move Lansdowne into the hex with the other destroyers. And I'm going to move, where is my battleships? 1, 2, 3. If I move the Washington into 1310, that's an issue because now it'll be in range of the Japanese because they can sight 3 hexes. But it's not in range of the Washington because the Washington can only sight 2 hexes unless Hai and Krishima are firing their guns, and they are not. So I'm going to stay where I am with Washington, and I'm going to move my destroyers. Oh, they're all cruisers. What are you going to do with them? Ooh. I'm going to leave them where they are right now. Or actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to, sorry, I'm thinking on my feet. I'm not working from a script. You may not have noticed that. So I'm going to move that into the same hex here. But I actually can't because there's stacking limitations. So we have 2 for every capital ship, cruisers, 2. So 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, I can. The stacking limit is 10 there, 12. So anyway, I'm good on that. So I'm going to mark everything. Oh, I'm going to flip those around too. So again, this doesn't really matter, but it's just kind of fun. So I'm going to click on these and get them selected. And we're going to flip them around. So now they're all headed the same direction. This actually is kind of a good direction to head too, because it lets you see the torpedo factors all out, not the gunnery. So the move is done. So it is now the gunnery combat, and I'm going to mark, oh, these should have been unfired earlier. So they're unfired. Good. So, whoops, we got to go back to gunnery combat. Didn't want to pass that up. All right. So Fletcher is looking at, oh, it does have guns, doesn't have torpedoes. So Fletcher is going to fire two. It doesn't matter who fires first. And if you're feeling, charitable, you can go work between each other and swap so everybody gets a shot. But sometimes it's easier for one side to take the shots first. And I'm playing solo, so I don't need to be nice to myself. So I'm going to take my Fletcher, and I got two, and I'm going to fire at the Makigumo, and I'm going to fire one. Oh, one hit. That's fantastic. I don't have to confirm because I'm the first person firing. So I'm going to bring up my charts. I'm going to roll my damage, and I roll a 9, which is a primary gun on Makigumo. And Makigumo, of course, doesn't have a primary gun, so Makigumo loses a tertiary. I'm just going to put the 1 in there and then close this up. And so that's taking its damage. So this guy is fired, and he's free to move next turn if he exists. But I don't think that's really going to happen. So the next shot is going to be Washington, and Washington is going to fire 14 at Nagara, and then it's going to fire 6 at Makigumo, and it's going to have to confirm each of the 6 because it's a second ship firing. So Nagara is Washington's firing 14 at Nagara. And boom. Hey, that's looking good. 1, 2, 3, 4 hits from the guns. This is going to be good. 4 hits. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And in the charts, we look at that, and gunnery damage is 8 is a secondary, 5 is a secondary, 4 is a hull, 4 is a hull. Now, it would be plunging fire if it were at maximum gun range, but it's not. It's really a knife fight. So we're going to be just taking that. So 2 hulls and 2 secondaries. So let's close this up. Let's find Nagara. Let's take ship data, and let's get rid of the 2 secondaries. So that's silenced, and we've taken off half of the hulls. Okay, that means the Nagara loses 1 speed, but it also means that in the subsequent phase, she can't move. So I'm going to mark her as moved. Okay, so that means that next turn she'll sit there. Next phase, she'll sit there. Okay, and so the 6 I'm going to fire at Makigumo. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So no hits on that, and Washington has fired. Okay, next I'm going to fire Helena at Kazugumo, and it's out of range of the tertiary, so it's just 6. Oops, I shouldn't have fired the Washingtons. The Washington, yeah, see, I was considering that this was the hex it's in. It's not, it's down here. So my rules are that we don't undo. If I made a mistake, you just go forward. So incredibly lucky golden BB shots with the tertiaries on Washington. So we can only go with the secondaries now. So the secondary is going to be 6. I'm going to roll 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I got 1 hit. So 1 hit is a 7, and the 7 is a primary on Kazugumo. I think I was making it. So it's going to take 1 more hit in the tertiary. There's one other thing that we can do here that's kind of fun. If I click on Helena, I can choose firing ships, and I can pick what I'm firing at. So I'm going to fire at Makigumo. So now I'm just keeping it straight who I'm shooting at. So Atlanta. Oh, there's one more thing that's kind of cool. You can mark in this log sheet too. So I'm going to actually, in the log sheet, I'm going to put in the name of the firing ship. So, oops, it's not Helena, it's Atlanta. All right. So now, instead of having just a big long line of die rolls, I'm going to be able to figure out easier whose die rolls are what. So Atlanta is going to fire at Kazagumo. So I'm going to mark first ship. I don't know if I'm going to keep doing this tonight, but I'm going to put it out now so you can see how to use it. So it's all secondaries. So I can't, excuse me, tertiaries. So I can't hit anything. So San Francisco is going to do Kazagumo. Whoops, we got to actually hit it there. Okay, so San Francisco has 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That was actually San Francisco, not Atlanta. So I'm going to get my hit, which is a 1, and I'm going to roll the damage. It's a 6, and the chart says a 6 is a tertiary. So Kazagumo gets a tertiary damage. Now we got to remember that that's still there for this turn, so we're okay on that. So Atlanta fired. It couldn't fire because it was an anti-aircraft cruiser. San Francisco actually fired, and Helena fired. So now we have destroyers, and they're all out of range. Lansdowne, Aaron Ward, Lardner, and McCullough. So that's not going to happen. They're 3 hexes away. 1, 2. Let's do it this way. 1, 2, 3. So all the Americans that fired can fire. Now we're going to go out to the Japanese, and we're going to start at the top this time. So this time we've got a whole different kettle of fish. Now this is range 3. These Japanese here have not fired. So the Japanese here are invisible to the Americans. But the Americans are at 3 hexes, so they were already visible to the Japanese, and they were firing. So the Japanese will be able to fire at them. These ships do not have the, this is the Kongo and the Haruna, and the Kongo and Haruna do not have the incendiary shells. So the Kongo and the Haruna are both going to fire. So I'm going to fire Kongo first, just because it's BB01. So the Kongo is firing 8 at the Washington, and it gets 2 hits. It would also get a +1 because it's a capital ship. So that's a close one, but 2 hits. So let's go for 2 hits on Washington at 7 and 9. 7's a primary, 9's a wow, this is hurting. Okay, so the Washington loses 2 primaries. And oops, that's good. That's not good. But anyway, that's fine. Next, we're going to go for the Haruna, and it's going to fire another 8. And we're not checking for penetration because they're, whether it's heavy armor or not, they're going to penetrate. So another 3 hits, and a 4th, and a 5th because it's a +1 because of size. So this is going to be a big one. So let's roll these out. 9, 7, 6, 10, 11. Ooh, this is tough. Okay, this is really tough. I don't want to play this game anymore. Okay, so we're going to come to Washington and make the ship data visible. And I'm going to move it over here, and then we're going to bring the charts back up because remember they have to. Hold on. Can get rid of the Allied ships guy. So this is Washington, and these are my damages, and the damages are 6, 7. 6 is a tertiary, 7 is a primary, 9 is a primary. So 2 more primaries. So make it a total of 4, and we're going to make the tertiaries 1. Okay, so that's, well, we don't want it to be 10, we want it to be 1. Okay, good. And that's it for the first 3. 10 is a hull hit. It's not plunging fire. And this is heavy with a heavy deck. So it means plunging fire wouldn't actually affect it, but it does get a damage here because the heavy guns will penetrate. And then the last one is an 11, which is 2 hull, and lose 1 speed. So it's a total of 3 hull, and now my speed is down to 1. So the way we do that is, remember, we set that to also be moved, right? So now that the damage is done there. So that's both of the battleships firing their primary guns. So I needed to confirm. See, that was a mistake. When I went up here for Haruna, the second ship after Congo, all these should have been hit because of shell splashes. That confirmed with it. So we missed that. But like I say, if you miss it, you go on. So I'm going to fire I'm going to fire 4 secondaries, which don't have to be confirmed because they're from the first ship. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 1 hit. And the 1 hit doesn't need to be confirmed. It's in the 6, and the 6 is a tertiary. So now we look at Washington and make sure his tertiary battery has no armor. So it does actually take that hit. If that hit had been the hull, then it wouldn't have penetrated, or if it had been the primary battery, it wouldn't have penetrated. Okay. So that's the first one. Now this guy, oh whoops, I fired the wrong way. Congo fired just then. This is Haruna. So Haruna's going to fire, and Haruna's going to take 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Haruna has 1 hit, and I'm going to roll the dice, and it's a 3, and a 3 is a torpedo mount. So the Washington doesn't have a torpedo mount, so it's just done that firing. So this guy, it can fire. No, it can't, because my range is 1, 2, 3. So it's out of range. So I'm going to pick Haruna, and I'm going to pick Kirishima or Congo, and I'm going to mark them fire. So they've fired everything that they can so far. All right. Now I need to move up the list. Now I have Miyoko and Takeo and Atago, and maybe one more. I do have one more. What have I got? I've got Maya, Takeo. Okay, that's it. So I have 4. Oh, I already fired that. Sorry. So I have 7 times 1, 2, 3, 4. And all these are subsequent to the original shots. So these guys are all going to be at confirm range. So 7 times 4 is 28. So let's roll. We're going to put in a marker here. So we're going to say cruisers. We got to cancel out of this first. Again, windowing, it sucks. Okay, so we're going to put in cruisers. I can't spell. Okay, I think that's right. My eyes are terrible. So I'm going to fire first. Whoops. Again, cancel, because you actually have to hit an enter to put the cruisers in there. So we're going to fire, you're going to fire 8 and 10 and 10. 8. Okay, and then 10 and 10. Okay, so now these all have to get confirmed because they're subsequent shots from the originals. So let's count up the 5s and 6s. Now remember, it's a 5 because the ships get a +1 for firing at a capital ship. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there's 9 hits. So I need to roll 9 dice, and I need to get 4s on a few of them. Oh, wow. Okay. So 4 hits. So I got 4 hits on Washington. So let's take them here. 1 hit, 2 hits, 3 hits, 4 hits. Okay. So for the charts, let's go look here at the damage. The 9 is a primary, and that's heavy. So it's got heavy armor, so it doesn't penetrate. And then the other 9 is another primary. It doesn't penetrate. 4 is a hull, and it doesn't penetrate because it's got the black box and it's not plunging fire. Plunging fire wouldn't matter because of the black box. So now we have a special rule that I'm going to go look up, and I'm going to be right back. Okay, so we actually missed a little bit here. A couple of things. Heavy cruisers. Heavy cruisers have special rules if they're enforced in the scenario, and I'm going to play with those rules. It's an optional rule. It's number 20.2 in your rule book for second edition. So heavy cruisers, CA, and some armored cruisers or coast defense ships have enough oomph in their guns to actually penetrate. So they may fire their secondary guns at ranges of 5 hexes. Not important here, but they can. Penetration. If a heavy cruiser or other noted ship obtains a hit at a range of 0 or 1 against a ship with heavy armor, the hit penetrates the armor if the target's hull armor does not have a box around it. Well, we're not at that range, so that's okay. And my armor does have a box around it, so they wouldn't penetrate at all. And the other one is critical damage. There are some changes there. So you might want to look at that in Rule 20.2. So I'm going to go ahead and close that up and keep going. So I always keep the rule book out and handy, as you can hear. So the cruiser penetration doesn't matter, and there's no hits. And the 11 is a critical hit, so 2 hulls lose 1 speed. Can't get in that, can't do that damage. So that's a wash. And then we've got the Isuzu. I really want to make a car joke right here, but the Isuzu can fire, but there's no point in firing at Washington because she's not going to penetrate. But she might hit Helena. So I'm going to have her fire Helena. Oh, whoops, we got to mark these all fired. Yeah. Got him by accident. There we go. So they're all fired. So now let's get Isuzu, make sure Isuzu is marked fired with its 2 secondary guns, and it's going to fire at Atlanta. Okay, so I can put that on there, but I'm gonna hold off on it right now. I mean, I can add the label onto Isuzu, but I'm gonna not do that. So I'm gonna fire at Atlanta. So 2 hits, 1, 2, nothing hits. And then the other guys are too far back, and they're destroyers, so their range is only 2 because they only have tertiaries. So these guys have all fired that can. Now it's time to get down to this guy. So I'm afraid the Fletcher's not going to make it. Now, none of these destroyers here can fire. Kagero can't. Kagero or Nagara, the cruiser with secondary armaments, can only make it out. Could make it to the Allied task force. I should probably start with him. Okay, so let's go ahead and mark him fired. Choose 2, and let's fire on San Francisco. So 1, 2. So no hits. All right. Now the destroyers here. They can't range anything but Fletcher. So it's going to be another hit fest, a slugfest. So we've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. Am I right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 21. So 21 secondary or tertiaries at Fletcher. So we're going to roll the many dice, and we're going to roll 11, and we're going to roll 10. And there we go. So how many hits have I got? I have, oh, I'm an adjacent too. So it's 5s and 6s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hits. And then add that in. And now we have a note there, so we can go back and look at the log if we want to. So I'm going to fire 21. So we're going to fire 11. And then we're going to fire, forgot. Remember, we fire more than one. We've got to confirm the hits with a 4 or better. So there were how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let us go. Wait, no. Yeah, 5s and 6s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 hit. We got to confirm 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we got 2 confirms, and those are going to come up as a 4 and a 5. So Fletcher takes 1 hull and 1 secondary, which goes down to a tertiary because she doesn't have any secondaries. So 1 tertiary. Oh, and 1 hull. So that's it for her. Well, Fletcher goes down. All right. So I'm going to drag Fletcher out. Okay. So that's it. And then nothing else is in range. So we're just going to mark all these guys fired. Okay, and Kagero is also marked fire. All right. Again, you don't need to do that. It's just a feature that I want to show up. All right. So the bombardment force is range 1, 2, 3, so they can't fire. And they also only have the incendiary rounds for another few rounds, another 12 phases. So I'm going to go ahead and call this guy done. Mark moved, mark fired, and we're going to move it forward to torpedo. So the Japanese technically can launch a torpedo strike. At range 1 and 2, 0, 1, and 2, they are full strength. At range 3, they're half strength. And range 4, they're quarter strength. So long torpedo shots were actually a real common thing in the Japanese Navy. And they actually were of mixed results, but occasionally they could bust something up, bust up an attack, because when the torpedoes come through the water, they would launch torpedo attacks of 40 and 50 and 60 torpedoes. So it would be very difficult to dodge them all and would break up the formations, much like firing rockets at a B-17 formation. It just broke them up and got them so that they were easy to pick off. But I have a lot of firepower, and Washington's already taken some hits. So I think I'm actually going to fire my all my torpedoes from this main group here. So I've got, let's see, 3 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I got 21 plus 2 more is 23. So I'm going to fire 23 torpedoes at Washington. So I'm going to fire, okay, but we have to have them, right? So 23 torpedo factors is going to come out to 12, because in Avalanche Press world, you take everything, divide it by 2, and if there's a remainder, you bring it up 1. So I'm firing 12 torpedoes at Washington. And I got 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to check my charts here. And torpedo damage, torpedo ship launch, torpedo modifiers. Since BB says 1, so it's coming up on the 5s or 6s. And Japanese torpedoes add 2 to damage if long lands and 1 otherwise. So it's a +2 on damage, but we're not going to worry about that yet. So we got how many hits? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh. Man, this game's going to go over quick. So we got 7. So we're going to roll on the gunnery. These are all +2s. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. So we have a lot of 7s here. So 7 is 3 hulls. So that's 3, 6, 9, 12 hulls. 11 is 5 hulls. So that means 17 hulls. And 8 is 3 hulls. So there's 20 hulls gone on Washington. So let's just add it up and see what we can do. We don't need to worry about the other stuff. So sometimes if you click in there, you get more information you need. 20 hulls, that's it. That's all she wrote. So we're in trouble now, the Americans. We've lost the Washington. Okay, and we've got some cruisers here up against 4 battleships. So I think that you've seen how this thing is going to play out. I think we might be at the spot where we can go ahead and stop, and I can get this online and you can take a look at it. So what we kind of talked about today were the markers here for the bombardment group and the objective. We talked about trying to keep the Washington at arm's length, which we kind of didn't do. And we came from 2 different sides. We looked at the different special rules. Anyway, this is a lot of fun. And the Japanese really just did a dog pile on top of Washington. So we changed the course of history tonight. I hope you all are going home to start taking your Japanese lessons. I'm going to leave you now and say thank you. And I just wanted to do the disclaimer that I normally do at the beginning and say that all these games that we're producing for Second World War at Sea or Great War at Sea, depending upon the game, are courtesy of Avalanche Press. Avalanche Press has always had a pretty firm policy on not doing Vassal, and we convinced them to do it. And if you have a copy of South Pacific, a physical copy, you're welcome to download this and give me a call at war at sea FC Fleet Command at on the internet machine. So that is going to be in the description here, and I will put it up as you see here. Again, big thank you to Dr. Benningoff and the team at Avalanche Press, and for my partners. There's many of them listed in development, but specifically Henrik Presson and Robin Rathbun, who have been helping me out tremendously on these. So I really appreciate all your guys' time and coming to watch the game. Thank you.